Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Totally not what I was expecting. I don't even know what I was expecting. Okay. So I can't even place the landscape because, okay, so you're standing, the three women wearing black dresses, standing on the banks of a river or not a lake. It looks like a river. So it's on grass. You're standing on grass and there is a kind of, I wouldn't call it an acacia, but there's a kind of tree kind of creeping overhead. The woman on the right is her hands on the trunk. And then there's another one. The three of you are looking to the left. The photos, you're in shade, so your eyes aren't like blasted by the sunlight. You're looking away to the left. Who knows what you're contemplating? Yeah, what's this photo?
We're contemplating the future kind.
Oh, nice.
That's the Christina and Nicole.
Okay.
I was just talking about. So this was a photo shoot in Singapore that we did maybe a couple of months ago, just to
in Singapore.
Have some. Correct.
And yet you're not all like dripping sweat because it's so hot and humid out there.
Well, we timed these things. It was an early wake up.
Okay. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
The photographer knew what she was doing.
Okay.
So yeah, that was kind of there's the other side of that camp shoot was my idea of us we're wearing like these Ghostbusters jumpsuits.
Okay.
One's red, one's yellow, one's blue, and it's kind of just this more unexpected approach to what we're doing. So this one I think is a little bit more Handmaiden's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more LinkedIn friendly.
Sure.
Whereas the other ones are a little bit more playful. But the essence is this, we are three very different people doing the hard work to just do something beyond surface appreciation and stuff.
Okay.
So really kind of working in the bowels of the industry.
Well,
because it's a dirty industry. It's a very dirty industry.
So would you say that all industries, all human endeavor has its underside that's kind of grungy and gross and other side, which is uplifting and nice, and maybe fashion is just very consistent? I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, what aspect of what you're trying to do is disruptive?
The way we're doing it or why we're doing it?
Sure, yes. Both.
I think most people nowadays understand that the industry is very polluting and harmful to people and planet. I think people get that.
Okay.
There's no big showstopper there. I think it's just when you understand a little bit more of the industry and also how people in the industry operate, right? Who's buddying up with who and who's gatekeeping, who's doing what with what.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's an opportunity there to, don't like using this word, but to disrupt, because it feels like everything's up for the taking right now. We're disrupting so many industries, like so many things are being, why not this? Why can't we kind of break through to the next level with this? And that's kind of just to accelerate things. We're not going out there to, all guns blazing. Not at all. That's not the way ahead. The way ahead is just to crack open certain nuts
mm-hmm.
and let people feast on the seeds. Or the nuts themselves rather. So yeah, I think a lot of people are pushing in the same direction, and we just want to push in that direction, but kind of way more accelerated and
So are you looking at things like, so my nerdy side knows a little bit about supply chain management and about, how these things go from start to finish. And then, like you're kind of, where do you help the situation kind of improve, right? So in terms of...
kind of towards the beginning.
Okay.
Like upstream.
Okay. So talk about that. What do you mean?
Well, I think within the industry, people are very quick to point fingers at the brands that they know, such as, I don't know, all the big ones, right? H&M, Zara, the usual suspects. Mm-hmm. And what we forget is that actually the industry is made up of a lot of different size businesses, a lot of mom and pop shops, especially in this part of the world.
Yeah.
And just because they don't necessarily have access to the team's sustainability teams or language barriers, or just don't have the overhead to join in these big initiatives or these innovations, there's a huge opportunity, or sometimes it feels like they're overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of legislation coming in from Europe and the US around product passports and traceability, and where does, people frequently focus on Europe and the US, but where does that leave Asia?
Sure.
Like how did they fit into all of that? And so I think we're kind of looking partly at it from a geographic perspective because we're here.
Yeah.
And we see that frequently it's not part of the conversation and it's not part of the thinking. And that feels like a missed opportunity.
So take me to school for a second. So when I went to Sri Lanka, one of the things that I saw was, first of all, there's let's say these plantation things where they're growing rubber, and other places where they're creating fabric and then making, nice shirts and whatever. And so I could see very kind of directly very small operations, as you say, like family-run operations of maybe 50 villagers or something. Everybody's contributing to making this stuff. So take us to school in the sense of, what does somebody who hasn't been to Asia, like what have you seen that makes it more real for them? In terms of, well, you might think that this is a big old factory, but actually it's just it's a small, humble little operation. So have you seen that? Or like?
Yeah, I lived in Cambodia for a long time.
Oh, wow.
And Cambodia is a big garment hub. Also, I think, I don't know how much people understand about this, but how much of different factories make different parts of the same product.
Right.
And therefore, with that comes all this overspill and challenge around accountability. And everybody's a bit hands off when something goes wrong somewhere along the line because that's not in my wheelhouse.
Right.
That's not in my space.
Or not my fault or whatever.
Or not my fault. So that the system has kind of become this very dispersed, lots of different spaces doing lots of different things to make one product, and that with it brings, maybe I think that the places you're describing are a little bit more of an ecosystem whereby they are not part of a huge machine, because if they're doing that kind of number of people and at that pace, they're probably not contributing to the big volumes that we see flying around the world. But, there is obviously, we do see a lot of, not a lot, there is regenerative farming, and there are pockets, as there are around the whole world, of people doing really meaningful, helpful types of production that benefit everyone, right? Topsoil and soil health is everyone's opportunity. But I think they're rare. And in the grander scheme of things, the way we're accelerating with ultra fast fashion, the way we're just sending things around the world, those people are a little bit of outliers. They can definitely, unfortunately, but they can definitely inform when it comes to heritage and craftsmanship, or even just, it's like slow fashion, slow food.
Okay.
These are extremely valuable parts of every chain, but they're not the majority, right? So they're not probably where you and I are getting our food or our clothing, for that matter.
So how do we, it's like somebody who's listening to this who kind of says, wow, Tanja sounds really switched on. How do they either imitate, highest form of flattery, imitate what you're doing, or learn or reach out or get involved, or, how do we expand that circle so that more people kind of come under your orbit and either understand what you're doing or contribute or help or whatever?
Well, I think first things I would always tell people is, find your sweet spot in this, because it's a marathon. And, frequently we see somebody doing something that sounds good, and maybe it is good in that context, or maybe it's just exciting or different. But I think finding something that you care about, that resonates with you and that fits into your life, is more important than that. So I think it does take some self-reflecting, and it does take that whole idea of, again, going back to who you are and what lights you up and what connects you to everything around you. Because there's always an entry point into the sustainable conversation.
Okay.
Or the sustainable movement. And if you're coming at it from production leadership, thought leadership, managing teams have to be sustainable in terms of their emotional, mental resilience and the capacity to continue producing their work, their thoughts, their ideas. So I think sustainability or environmentalism, it's a much broader thing that doesn't necessarily only apply to physical material production. I think it's a mindset around how we engage with things full stop, respecting sentient beings. And it kind of trickles on from there. Once you start opening those portals, you start making those connections for yourself. You don't need somebody to stand there and tell you, today do this, or this list of this, or this is how I start my day. Everybody's inundated with information. I think one kind of needs to find their own space. And honestly, there's space for everyone, because the more niche you are, the weirder you are. Actually, it's the better, because you'll find that there are like 1,000 other people who feel exactly the same way.
Right.
And then you start creating these communities or these movements. But part of what we're going to do at the Future Kind is, we are climate tech, but we're also going to start creating a human arm of what we do. And that is going to be around events, education, white papers, research, and community building. So something more public facing.
Cool. Amazing.
Because we see a lot of just great ideas, and we'd like to take that further. And on a more personal level, I'm going to start going into psychology, because I feel that when I go to these events and people are talking about sustainable fashion and they're talking about the industry, we have to make more, we have to make less, we have to make it this way, we have to make it that way. And then people are talking about the consumers, which is the worst one, or the users, or the
buyers,
or the shoppers, or the whatever you want to call it. But they're always somehow categorized as in, we need to educate the consumer, or we need to give the consumer better products. But what about a different way? What about if the consumer simply doesn't consume? I mean, I think that we overlook this whole human aspect of that we're frequently just manipulated into buying these things that we don't need or want. And we don't even know it's happening, because it's happened from day zero, and everything around us has primed us. And the psychology around that I find fascinating, because we can innovate textiles and materials and everything until we're blue in the face, but unless we address why people are shopping so ferociously, and nobody really has that conversation. And when I bring it up, people are kind of taken aback, like, why are you bringing brains and psychology and emotions into this? Because that's where the power is. And we keep on giving it away to other people, and we pay them to take it from us. So that kind of going back to that rebellious streak of what gets you fired up, that gets me fired up, because not only are people ruining ecosystems, but we're paying them to do it. And anyway, so as you can tell, I get very passionate about this, but I think, to me, I see this opportunity to come in from a psychological perspective and to actually ask people a little bit more about, what is it that you're trying to fill? What's the gap? And how's that working for you? Because it's not.
Yeah. So I'm going to end with one last question. When is your PhD thesis or popular book coming out?
Yes.
You should see your face.
No, it's because it's funny. Just last week, Christina and I said that we're going to write a book. So
nice.
It's a timely question. However long it takes to write a book, and if anybody has any tips on publishing, or please send them our way, because it's a couple of years ago I was going to write a book on eco-anxiety, and I ended up not writing it. I'm glad I didn't, because I think I peaked too soon in that conversation. Nowadays you can see BBC videos on eco-anxiety stuff, which is fantastic. So I think people are now a little bit more closer to it. But Christine and I do want to write a book. So
nice. I can happily connect you to lots of people from the podcast and outside of the podcast on book writing. Tanja Wessels. That's it. It's been an hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me and for making the time and for the great questions.
No, great. I asked a great question. Woo! That's
I said questions. There were multiple questions.
This is great. And you go to Milan and take them by storm. I love it.
Will do. Thank you so much.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.